taught private lessons for over half of that, and then went into teaching in public schools. I taught private lessons when my kids were little. I have a 20-year-old, 18-year-old, and almost 60-year-old. Oh, boys. I don't know how to do that. So I'll just do that.
And probably have it closer to your mouth.
Yeah, I don't
Please.
do that.
I put it on the flannel. Okay. The flannel has more stability.
That is true. I can button it up too.
There you go.
Right. Am I touch on that?
You don't even think you do
I
that.
don't think I did either. So I've been doing that for a while. I'm in my 12th year of teaching full time at the collegiate level. So I've been teaching people to be music educators for that long. I taught public school for several years, and like I said, I work with lots of student teachers and help a lot of people develop their studios and how to become music educators in general. So I currently am not teaching private lessons, but that is because of my, I'm just gonna do this, there we go. Because of my schedule and the time that I do. So I direct a lot of shows and I work with a lot of individuals. In general, I would say that I'm a vocalist and like a pianist, but more than anything I sing, and I'm a general music person. So love all the instruments and love doing all of that. My sons all play lots of instruments, specifically guitar and bass. So very musical family, and we spend a lot of time doing musical things for fun. So anyway, I wanted to talk about how to have a studio. So I know that here you have a space already, and you're all sharing the same space, I'm assuming. And what is it that each of you are teaching? We can just go voice, okay? Guitar? Percussion, okay, awesome. So these are all very different things, except for they all have the same kinds of methods in the way that they are designed. Have you ever taught private lessons before? No? Yes? Okay. In your own studio or? Okay, that's okay. We call that the studio. So mine was half of my living room was my studio space. So it's just you do what you can, and so okay, and then
4 lessons.
Okay. Awesome.
And I've studied with like 10 different people.
Okay. Perfect. So
Got the grant.
awesome. So part of it is trying to figure out all of the different layers of what it takes to be a successful music teacher, which is exactly what you guys are, right? So one of the things that I talk about is mindset and thinking of yourself as a teacher. So again, this goes probably from the psychology side of how I think is it's important to think of yourself as an educator. It's important for you to think of yourself in a way that gives you confidence. So if you have students coming into you and you're a fabulous performer, that's really cool, and you need that in order, and you have to have those skills, but you also need to come across as someone who's capable of teaching them. And that is actually the hardest part of being a music educator. It's one of the only professions where you have to be very good at your craft. And you have to continue to practice that, and that has to be half of who you are, really. You have to keep doing it, but you also need to consider yourself as an educator. One of my least favorite things that people say, honestly, is that they'll always fall back on teaching. Like they can always fall back and do that if they don't make it in another way. And the reason I say that is not if you've ever had that thought, because I think all of us have. Like, I'd love to be a performer, but I don't necessarily know that I'll be able to do that or whatever. We're like, I'll just go ahead and teach if I can't do anything else. Teaching is a craft. It is also an art. And doing it well is actually pretty challenging. You can go to school and learn or whatever how to be an educator for years. And so it is also a practice, just like a practice of being whatever you are, a singer, an instrumentalist, things like that. So mindset is really important, and that is one thing that I always talk about with my students is how to perceive yourself that way and making sure that you think of yourself in that manner. Because most of us have taken a lot of lessons, had lots of different teachers, had a lot of different experiences in a studio setting, but we've always been on the other side of it. So to be on the teaching side of it, suddenly we feel like we don't know what we're doing, or sometimes we do. And I think one of the things we need to recognize is we don't know what we don't know. And so it's okay to ask questions and to continue to develop that as we go through learning how to be educators, which is what you guys are doing. That being said, I don't want you to ever forget that you are a performer, because that's a really big part of who you are and why you do what you do. So usually they're 30-minute lessons, as you're all aware of, because that is exactly what you have experienced in your whole entire life. But structuring it in a way where you kind of get them interested and have a plan and having something that they can look forward to each time to know the structure of the setting. I typically teach in 50-minute sections of time. Yeah, so either one of those things, and you get into a rhythm where, as in when you or all of the lessons you've had have been 50 minutes? Okay.
But you just don't get enough time.
It is really hard because you feel like you just get started, but 30 minutes.
Warm up some breath exercises, so you don't have time to work any repertoire that you might.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, yes. So we have that, but it's typically like piano lessons or guitar, or like it's usually 30 minutes, and you start with same exact thing, some kind of a warm up, a technique, getting into something where you're actually showing them something and you're modeling it for them in some way is a great technique, and then having them practice it and then reviewing what it is and talking about what you need to do for next time. So, which leads me into the next thing is I like to do practice agreements and different kind of contracts with students, because it gives them accountability and they have more ownership in it, and trying to talk to them about how to practice. I mean, you could study how to practice forever too. So we all do that naturally. I mean, I'm assuming, which is maybe something I shouldn't do, but I actually just talked to one of my students yesterday, and I said, I am really good at sight reading, which probably sounds really arrogant, but I am so good at it because I would sight read in almost every lesson growing up. I just didn't practice. I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to do it.
Acquiring discipline is one of the hardest things ever.
Absolutely, yes. And as even in our 20s, like we don't want to do that either. Right? We just want to get out and play. Well, you get better at playing and you get better at performing when you practice well. So we always say perfect practice makes perfect performance, which is whatever. That's just something that people say all the time, but it's true. However you practice is how you're going to perform. And so, which is another thing I'll talk about in just a second. But basically designing 30 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever you do. Will you be teaching 50-minute lessons for boys? Okay. Okay. So thinking through how much you're going to charge for that. I typically do anywhere from 20 to 25. I have some people who have done up to $30, depending on credentials, experience, and who you are and where you live. I think probably, let's just say San Francisco, you could probably charge more than in Grand Island or York, which is where I live. So 25 is pretty high in York, and yet with the credentials that I have, I don't think I would ever do it for less, personally. Just because of, there's also the idea of like, it's kind of like paying for a membership at a gym. It's like you feel like you should work out, not because you paid for it, but because you feel like you have a little more ownership in it. Like when we get something for free, we maybe don't try as hard if you have that like that kind of mindset. So it's a balance of where you live and who you are and what you're teaching and what you're doing. How to pay. This is one of the things that I think is really important to think about, which is how do you want them to pay? Are they going to pay in cash? Are they going to pay every single lesson? Are you going to do, because I have personally done all of these things, and there are flaws in all of them. So you have to think through every single step of this. So I would typically say for a month, you get 4 lessons. 4 lessons. At the time, I think I was doing $15 a half hour or something, or $12.50 or something. It was $50 for a month when I very first started, when I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I didn't have really any credentials or experience. So it would be, you get 4 lessons for $50, and if you don't let me know ahead of time that you are skipping or not going to make it, then you don't get to make it up. That was how I did it. That's how in my classes I am anyway. So we have that, and then what are you going to do if if they do need to make up? Or what about the months that have 5 weeks in them? So you have to think about how you want to do that. I don't know. You guys are each designing your own studios, right? As far as, and that's a subjective term. So you have a space, but the studio is what you have created, which is how you're going to pay, how they're going to pay, how you're going to design it, and things like that. So have you thought through how you're going to do all of the payments? Kind of. Do you have questions about that? Or do you...
I mean, so far I only have the 2, so I don't know if they cash.
Each time?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Well, last time the girl, grandma, gave me $100. I was like, okay, so she's paid up for it.
Okay. And that's a way if people want to do it ahead of time.
That was totally her call.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for that or say she needed to pay ahead or anything like that. That's what she wanted to do.
And then, of course, keeping track of that is important. But yeah,
Always have my book.
your notebook, like paper is great. Instead of old school. I think that the only thing for me personally is not having a contract and not being able to rely on and use that as an income. And consistently being able to like, no, I have this much money every month. So it's a little bit uncomfortable if that's what you're planning on as your means of, money, as a way of having money. But so that's something to at least think about. But then if they don't decide they can't come, then they don't pay. And so to me, it helps with an accountability aspect where, they're getting so many lessons quarterly or whatever, however you want to do it, like trimester kind of things, which works for like in the public school setting when we have our fall semester, spring semester, and then the summer. So really like doing it in threes is pretty good for most people. But you can do however you want to. And that's one of the problems is when the sky's the limit, we don't know how to, what to pick. Like there's too many options almost. So you'll probably find that the way you have it is great or not, and then you'll fix it. So sometimes we make mistakes that way. So payment, practice agreements is something that I like to do because it forces students to get into that habit. I'm not going to in a school setting, I have the accountability as far as I'm giving them a grade. I'm giving them a grade for what they're doing, which is very different than a studio setting when they're coming to you because they're wanting to grow and learn, or because their parents or grandparents want them to learn. And that is a hard situation to be in because as someone who's younger than 19 in the state of Nebraska, they have, 19 is the legal age in Nebraska, which you're probably, I don't know if you're aware of that or not legal. For example, when you're 18 in most states, you are an adult. In Nebraska, you're not until you're 18.
So basically, you're talking about just being able to advocate for yourself?
Parental consent and communication and things like that. If you have a student that is 20, then you don't have to talk to anybody else in their life. In fact, my job at the collegiate level, I have parents who do like to sometimes try to get information, and I just say, I'm sorry, that is actually against the law. Thank you. If you'd like any information, you're more than welcome to talk to your son or daughter.
It's a different kind of HIPAA.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I used to work in a therapist's office.
Perfect, yeah. So 18 in the state of Nebraska, though, still needs parental consent, or at least communication, which brings me to the next thing, which is communication. How are you communicating with your students? How do they know what the expectations are for you and for them? So I've always told my students, I expect you to come here ready. I expect you to have practiced. I expect there to be growth. And even though you're paying me for this, and I'm creating a setting and an environment where I have those expectations of you, but you can also expect me to be ready and on time and to be prepared to move you forward. And so it's kind of this relationship that you create within your studio and what the expectations of the people can have. The next is, I just said communication, so which brings me to performances and recitals and things like that. You don't have to do performances and recitals and whatever. Obviously, you know that, but as performers, I'm guessing you have also performed in different settings. Not every studio has that. You don't have to, but it's something to definitely think about. It's kind of a reward for them or a kind of a goal, but I also am of the philosophy that performing music is not the main goal of making music or learning it. So that is just my own personal thought process, is making music for the sake of making it and learning how to become a guitar player that can, why learn how to play the guitar? Why learn how to do any kind of percussion? Why learn how to sing? And that's something that I've thought a lot about because in music education anyway, we have people who they think that music's purpose is to play at a football game. Or they think that music's purpose is to get people excited at a basketball game. or to sing the national anthem. Thank you very much. Or, you know, you taught my kids how to play the recorder, and therefore I expect to be able to see what they learned in a setting. So that is kind of a mindset that we've created in America of we expect there to be some kind of an end to it and a purpose for it versus just music for music's sake. Why do I love to sing? Because of who I am as a human being and because of the things that matter to me. Because it helps me connect with other cultures, and it helps me become more holistic as a person, and it helps me connect with people, and those are really important aspects of life. And so for me, I infuse all of that in what I do when I'm teaching. Is I am not teaching you just so that you can go play the drum during a marching band competition. Like, that's cool and that's rewarding and it's exciting, but that is not the end, because what if you don't win? What if it doesn't go well? Okay, well, you can learn from that as well. So same thing with singing. What if I audition to be in an opera and I get to be in the choir instead of the lead that I wanted? That you can still learn from that. You can still grow and develop. And guitar. I mean, guitar is a little different because I don't typically go on like a corner and start singing opera or start singing folk music. I don't typically do that. I could. I don't think I should. But or to grab. Actually, there's a percussionist. I cannot think of what her name is. She is a percussionist. She is a professor at the conservatory in Glasgow, and she is like the #1 percussionist in the world who actually performs as a solo percussionist. Like it's amazing. So for like 20 or 30 minutes at this conference I was at, she played, I don't even know what it was, something, and she had a snare, like just a snare for 30 minutes. And she had, and this other thing that she used, I can't remember what it's called anymore, but it was just like, wow, that's unique. Like usually people don't do that. But guitar, you can grab and like, you know, you're all at a house together and you like, let's all make some music. So it is a little different, right? You can go on a street corner and play guitar and sing. What style?
Me standing on a street corner singing a cappella.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like having some purpose.
Well, for me, anyway.
Yeah.
But the camaraderie of making music with people.
Yes.
I want to do it by myself.
Yep. And that aspect of the camaraderie of that is really part of what I was just saying. So as part of that social environment and developing relationships. And so to me, even in a studio setting or a classroom setting, it doesn't matter. It's not just about learning the technical aspect. And yet that is also part of it. So the unique thing about music, which I'm sure you can all relate to, is that music has so many layers to it. And one of the things I was reading about and just discussing actually today, was the types of teaching. So there are different types of teaching. There's classical trained. Are you all classically trained musicians?
Define.
There's multiple ways to define that. So yeah. So classical guitar is different.
Yeah, I don't play classical.
Okay, and that's okay. So there's that aspect, or classical training of the voice, and percussion. I would assume that there's also multiple ways to teach that. So there's different types of teaching, and there's one that's more of a very strict, regimented style where you start here at point A, and you keep going, and then you move. It's like music theory. You go through the book, and it kind of kills the love of music a little bit. And I teach music theory, so I understand that. I'm like, I promise at the end of this it'll be exciting because you'll be able to do all kinds of things, and you'll know why. And they're like, I don't really care about that. But then when they get there, they're like, that is actually really cool. So we have that style, which is how I learned how to play the piano. I learned how to play the piano where you sit a certain way, and your hands are a certain way, and your fingers are used in certain places, and that's how you do it. And if you don't do it that way, it's wrong. Now, I don't actually feel that is accurate anymore. That is definitely one way to do it. But there's also the other side of that, which is, why don't you just take this drum home and see if you can figure out what to do with it? Because there's really no wrong way to do it. Now, that being said, you can sing incorrectly, and it can actually ruin your voice. Adele is a perfect example of that. She couldn't sing for a very long time because she was singing incorrectly, and which was unfortunate for her. Same.
Oh, yeah.
Which the voice is really interesting too, because we can have like psychological issues with things, and that can affect you physically. Yeah.
Traumatic events in your life.
Yep.
It totally took my voice away.
Yep. Which is so fascinating.
Yep.
And the nice thing about, I would say, instruments that you can actually touch, well, I guess you can touch this one, but still, is, it's going to affect you. It could, like, psychologically, it could affect how you play guitar or play whatever, but the guitar itself is fine. You know what I mean? So it is a little different in that sense. But that being said, as an educator, which is exactly what you guys are doing as you teach, that's all part of it. Which is why I think I was so drawn to psychology, because it's like, here's this kid that's crying every time they play this piece of music. Okay, why? Like, I don't need to counsel them. That's not what I want to do. But, like, maybe we can work through that, and music can be healing. And so I just think that's important, because our jobs as any kind of a teacher is way bigger than just teaching them how to sing a note. And I think that's important for us to understand the weight of it. The other type of teaching that I like to talk about is called popular musicianship. This is a new concept. It is, it's actually really popular. Ironically, that's the word that I'm going to use, in Southern California, specifically in the University of Southern California. And it's kind of, that's where it started. And Michigan State now also really focuses on this. And they've had lots of conferences and different things where they talk about this. So it's the idea of kind of the opposite of what I just said, which is try the music, try songs, use pieces of music you like, find ways to, like, if someone wants to learn how to play rock music and they want to do something like that versus a classical, like, aria, okay, or whatever, those are different things, but still, use that. Use that thing that they like. Help them develop their love of music. And, like, my son, for example, wanted to build a guitar. He ripped it up, came home from a camp, and he's like, I'm taking my guitar apart and I'm going to make it better. And I'm like, okay, well, I hope you have a guitar at the end of this and you can still play it. He was 12, and he now he just built his 4th guitar last week, actually. He sold it, so, which is cool, because he likes to figure that all out. But, like, he figured it out and learned it, kind of like I was saying, here, take this drum and see what happens, kind of thing. And so he did that, and he now will ask me some of the hardest music theory questions beyond what half of my students ask me at the collegiate level. And he was asking about augmented 6 chords the other day. He didn't know that's what he was asking about, and different modes and scales. And I'm like, that's what you're doing. My other son, he's like, what is this? And I'm like, well, it's an augmented 1, actually, which is weird, with an added 3rd on it. And he's like, okay, cool. And I'm like, okay, well, if I would have just said, here, look at this piece of music, that is an augmented 1 chord, which is also weird. It's probably a secondary something, but it was like, okay, so now when he looks at that, he's like, okay, that is cool. I like how that sounds. I like this. I'm talking about Neapolitan chords in my theory classes right now. When you can listen to the music, this is a Schubert piece, and it's like when you listen to the music, you're like, oh, that's why that does that. So it's so cool to be able to connect those sides. But it is not cool to just sit and learn this and then have nothing else to connect it to. And so that's the idea of popular musicianship. It cultivates creativity and believes that everybody is creative and that everyone can be a musician. Musicians, I think, the interesting thing about all of us is that we are not in competition with each other. Unless you're auditioning for a part in an opera and you don't get it, but still. But, like, we're not in competition. We're building each other up. We're like, yes, that's so cool. Teach me how you did that. And so I think that's a mindset that we're teaching our students as well. One of the things that I think is also interesting about music or popular musicianship and what we do, and that's important as educators, is music it can be a commodity. And I think that, unfortunately, sometimes it loses the energy and the joy of it. And so keeping that balanced, I think, is really important. As far as performances and recitals, I'll go back to that, is we like to, performing is fun. I love performing. Like you were saying, I'm up on a stage with the lights and everything, and okay, give me a microphone and I will go to town. I'd love it. Like, it's fun for me. I actually, in one of the settings, I was announcing who had made a particular group that I had auditioned. It was in front of, I don't know, like 500 people or something, and I was telling them who had made it. And I laughed, and even up there, I was like, you know what? I'd be way more comfortable if I was singing this to you. I'm like, it's just my comfortable place, right? So I do love performing. And speaking up in front of people is actually just fine for me because I do it a lot, and that's part of being on stage, right? But performance is not the end necessarily, but it is a great reward, and it is a great way for them. But it's another thing. Some people can play guitar, play anything, sing anything, play piano in a private setting, and you put them in front of people and they suddenly forget how to use their fingers, okay? And we've probably all been there at some point in our life, even if it was way at the beginning, right? Or maybe we weren't and we were just like, I don't know, I screwed up, whatever. That's just, everyone has a different personality, but it's a skill for them to learn how to get up in front of people at any age and learn how to do that. So be thinking about, if you want to do a recital, how would you do that? If you're going to do voice, if we're teaching voice, how would you do that in a recital setting? Would you play the piano? Would you have somebody else play? Perhaps there are some percussion or guitar students who also want to, like, you guys could collaborate and create some kind of event. And you guys are all musicians and you're all creative. I know that just because. But you can be creative in that setting as well. And so that's something to think about. Honestly, like, you could probably even do it here if you wanted to do something. I'm totally just offering that because that's where you teach. But like, this would be a great place to have a recital of some kind. One of the things I don't like about music is that oftentimes people think of it as background music, and I think that's really disheartening as someone who's prepared a piece, and yet that's something that a lot of people think is great. Guitar is a great example of that. It's like, can you just play some music for me at this event? And then everyone's talking. Well, that can be really disheartening, and yet that's a great...
A lot of money.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Yep. I would love to sing for you. Yeah. So
I'm fine with that. Hey, I'll sit up here and do what nurtures my soul. I will take my money and run.
It eliminates all the criticism too.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, that's true. Okay, there's good sides to both sides.
No, I've paid a lot of bills that way. It's fine with me.
That's awesome. So anyway, I think
It's
this
a mindset, right?
it is a mindset, which is where we started, and I literally wrote that down. So yeah, it's mindset. And I said blah blah blah. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't actually know what time it is. I had my phone out, and I don't. Yep. Just about done. Perfect. So I was going to talk for about 30 minutes and then answer any questions you guys had, and we can keep talking. So, value of learning music, we talked about that. Each of you are valuable as an educator, and which you don't have to call yourself that. You can call yourself a studio teacher. You can call yourself whatever you want. But I urge you to have a thought of what you are, because that's part of your identity. And so continue to be a musician, but also think of yourself in that way. I always think of, like, man, if I think through all of the hats that I wear and the things that I do, but an educator is a really big part of it. And being confident in what I do know and understanding that there is a lot that I don't know is a really important balance. And so I have this circle that I've drawn. One of the things that we talk about in psychology for musicians is understanding that that everything goes in a circle. So we have the person who created the music, so whether that's the composer or whatever. You have the performer, and you have, or the director can be in the middle of there, or teacher. So we have this, and then we have the performer, which could also be one of those people, and I know that, and then you have the listener. And the listener is just as big of a deal as the other people. And so understanding that relationship, and that we are all connecting in that way, and that it continues to go in a circle. And then that drives into why things are created and why they're performed and why they're listened to. And that is just as much of a creative activity, active listening. Although passive listening is useful, we can find it. But passive listening is something that everyone typically does. They don't usually actively listen. And so that is also a skill that we can teach our students. But I end up teaching the parents just as much as I'm teaching the students, and how to be an audience member, how to do those kinds of things, and the way that students act in those settings. But it's important for us to kind of understand that circle of all of that. Unique aspects of being a music teacher I already touched on, but it's important, and I think this is a good way to end, is to find balance, but to have a structure to what you're doing. You obviously have a place that you're doing it. Here, I have jumped to different places when I've taught lessons. First, I wanted to be in my home, and then I decided I didn't like that, and then I went to other places. It doesn't really matter. But to know how they're going to pay and how you're going to structure your actual lesson time is really important. Knowing what kind of method you're going to be using is kind of a big deal. There are so many different series that you can use, whether it's digital or actual books, doesn't matter. But having a goal. Where are you starting? Where are you going? And how are you developing? It's like a cycle, like a cyclical development, right? So each time we touch on something, we keep growing and building until we get to the end of whatever we're learning. Maybe our goal is to get to be able to play Moonlight Sonata by the end of the school year. How are you going to get from point A to point B? Okay? What are we going to do, and what musical aspects is that? The other thing that I will say is the instrument and the choices of pieces that we teach our students or have them learn, those are just the mediums that we use in order to teach the musical concepts. So musical concepts are really the main goal, and the highest level of that is if they can apply whatever it is that they've learned to something else. So you have all experienced that, I'm sure of it. But knowing how you're going to get from point A to point B. Being on the student side of it, we know exactly how to do that ourselves now, right? You can take a piece of music, you can learn it, and then you add the different layers to it, and you get it ready to perform for yourself or for other people or whatever. But that's, how do you teach a student how to do that? I'll never forget the first year I taught ear training. This was actually 20 years ago. I'm like, I don't remember learning how.
Ear training?
Yeah.
I don't even remember learning how to do that. So I had to break it down, which makes me sound probably arrogant, and I know that, but whatever. But it's like, I know how to do that. It goes back to I just said a little bit ago how I feel like I'm very good at sight reading. It's because I didn't practice. It's because I sat down at the piano and sight read in front of my teacher every week. Also, he made me quit when I was in 7th grade, and I started back again when I was 18. Because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to learn, and I also was not taught how to practice. So that's important to develop that. But voice, same thing. I got so good at not even audiating, I was just mentally thinking about the intervals and singing them and practicing them, and then I would go and sing it. Well, that wasn't great because I didn't have any muscle memory, but man, was I good at sight reading. Man, were my intervals good. So got really good at that, but those weren't the skills I was supposed to be developing. Although I have used them a lot in my life. So I think finding the balance of you being a musician and a teacher, however you want to say that, either way is important. And make sure you know who you are and why you're doing it and how you're going to do it, and think through all the steps of you need to get paid because you are worth that. Don't ever do anything for free. And I think we're all in the same boat there. So, because a lot of people do. A lot of people think music is like, oh, we'll just teach me this real quick. Well, I'm gonna pay, but no. I mean, yes, you can have a lesson or whatever. So it's important to have that all organized. As far as practice agreements go, that's totally up to you, and the method that you use is totally up to you. But I would say be pretty solid on the way that you are, your expectations of your students and of yourself. Okay. Do you have any questions or things that you thought of that I didn't touch on?
So regarding like practice agreements, do you mean like a paper, like a contract, like physically, or are you talking about more than?
I have done both. Verbal is a really good idea, and then they forget about it. So do I sometimes. So I literally, for example, if I have someone audition to be in one of my groups, I actually have them write an agreement, performance agreement, because basically it's like, what if they decide not to come anymore? Okay, well, great, then do I fill their spot or do I not? How do you manage it? It's important to understand that part of it. I would actually have some of my piano students, and this is for younger kids. If someone's an adult and they're coming for lessons, they're probably doing it because they really want to. But they also might not know that you need to practice. And then you have to teach them how to do that. What am I supposed to do? Here's some warm-ups that you can do. Here's some things you can work on. Practice this technique. I also think that most people when they're practicing, let's just say playing the piano. If you're playing the piano and you get to a part that's hard. Okay, you look at it and you go back to the beginning and you play it and you get to that part again. You're like, okay, I have to get it this time. That is like the worst way to practice, as you guys are probably aware of. You have to work that area or keep going. Like there's just different ways that you can, you have to learn how to do that. You have to teach them how to do that because I had to learn that myself. And continuing to go huge performance technique that most people are not good at. Especially on well, for me, for piano, I'm not that great. I mean, I'm not perfect at it, but if you just keep going, nobody really cares.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
The
Nobody cares.
untrained don't catch. Oh my God! You know how many times I've flubbed lyrics online, on stage, and just if you just keep going, fake it till you make it.
And
People
maybe
don't even
you'll come
notice.
to, and maybe not.
No, most of the time, because I get off stage and I'd say to my husband at the time, I'd be like, "Did you? Oh," and he's like, "No, I didn't even notice." And I was like, and then after so many times of people being like, "I didn't even notice," I was like, "Oh, nobody's even noticing." Okay,
Guess I'll make up my own words this time.
it's just my own neurosis.
You'll notice if you stop and try to start over.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
or if your face goes like this.
Oh, your facial expressions are everything. That's what
You're like,
your poker
oh,
face is,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And those are all skills that we learn
You
over
just pick
time.
up on, it's
Yep.
kind of trial by fire with that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so giving them a performance opportunity is great if you can. And
So my biggest issue with this is that I suck at piano. And it would be starting out, I can do breath warm-ups, I can do this, that, and the other, but playing the piano
Yep.
and just playing the scales and all the warm-ups and things like that, I really just need to, I can do it, I'm out of
there's two things that I will tell you. First of all, most people who look at a musician for whatever reason think they can somehow do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I am a trained singer. Can I be a piano accompanist? Yeah, I can. Should I play a whole performance of me just playing the piano? No, that would be a stupid idea and boring for everybody. That was actually one of the reasons why I didn't teach voice at first, was because I'm like, I obviously am not good enough to do this. It was, again,
That's the only piano thing that is
Yep.
like killing me. I'm like,
Yep.
can I do it?
Most voice teachers cannot play the piano. By the way.
And none of them that I've studied with. Well, I mean, maybe they can't play, but they are at least are smoothly getting me through warm-ups. And I couldn't smoothly get through somebody through warm-ups right now.
I think that you'll get used to it over time,
Okay.
and you'll create that structure in your mind of how it works. Like, I know it's like Tetris, right? Like you just kind of
Yeah.
suddenly you
No,
just
I mean,
do it.
I've started
Yeah.
at home with the keyboard, but that's really, because everything else I can take from. I've studied with classical, I studied with a woman who worked at ACT in San Francisco, I've studied with a rock woman who did the speech level singing,
Okay.
just basically speaking on pitch, to get through things. Like I've done, so it's just like I've got all these different disciplines to pull from.
Which is awesome, and
Yeah.
you will create your own,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
kind of what
which is really
I'm planning
cool.
on doing.
Yeah. So the piano, I would say, don't just use one hand,
Okay.
or do octaves.
Yeah.
Like octaves and the da-da-da, just do those kinds of things. Like don't let that keep you from teaching people what you know.
Okay.
But also there are 100 different digital things that you can use.
That's what I thought.
And most people, because the cool part about that is you can say, here, sing this art song. Okay, well, how are they going to practice that at home? I did it in my head and learned how to sight read. Okay, cool, whatever. But that's not very musical, right? And who knows if I couldn't play it with or do it with accompaniment. You can have digital things that you actually use during your lessons, but then they also can practice with that. And so there's not that element of how do I do whatever. If you're going to do a performance setting or recital setting of some kind, you might want to have somebody who can play the piano and accompany for that, which is so normal. In a school setting, that's what we do.
Oh yeah.
Like, I can play warm-ups and I can play chords and I can play all kinds of things, but I can't do that and also teach them. It's hard to do that. So if you can find, and some people think of it as a crutch, who cares? It doesn't matter. Because the bottom line is they're learning vocal technique, and the piece of music, like I said earlier, is just the medium. It doesn't matter. You're teaching them the technique and how to be musical. So don't let that be a barrier to be successful. But that's so normal and common.
Okay.
So yeah, just use. Are you more comfortable with your right hand or
No, lefty.
lefty? Okay.
Yeah.
So you maybe want to sit closer like this
Yeah.
if you're working with
I'll go
female
home and
voices.
start. You gave me permission. I'll go home and figure something out.
And also, this is one of my favorite things that I've learned. I didn't know I did this, but I was playing I was in a rehearsal setting, I had 16 people, and I was brand new at the collegiate level, and I was playing the piano, and I was like, well, I totally screwed that up. And they were like, what?
You screwed up?
Like, yeah. And they were like, you admitted that? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I played the wrong note.
Right.
Let's do it again. Or the rhythm was totally wrong. Whatever. So becoming comfortable with making mistakes and realizing that you're not going to do it perfect every time is actually really good for your students too, because they're like,
Oh,
oh.
I'm the queen of that.
I'm
I
pro
don't
making
have
mistakes.
I don't have a problem with any of that. I'm
I have the
just
same
admitting I
idea.
screwed up.
I think everybody does, yeah. But to admit it is great because we don't need to have that front of that we're perfect. So I said that perfect practice makes perfect performance. Okay, well that's first of all a lie, but that's the thought process. We always say that like in basketball, and I have no idea what I'm talking about when I say this, but like yeah. So percentage wise, like free throws, what would that be? What's a good percentage of making free throws? Anybody?
100.
You are such a musician.
Probably anywhere from 70 to 75 would probably be
Considered good? Is that good? I'm looking at the people who might know. I have no idea. You're like, don't talk to me.
Well, I can
Okay.
tell you in sales,
Okay.
which is not sports, but you're looking at like 10 to 1 to maybe even 100 to 1.
Okay. So if we do that in music when we're playing it, people are like, man, they suck, right? So we have this mindset that we have to somehow do it perfect, or if we sang half of the notes correctly, or played half of the chords correctly, or whatever we played was sort of in the right key as everything else, that is, well, it sounds like reggae a lot of the time, which I love reggae, but it does. Have you ever heard that? Like the accompaniment will be in one key and then like the singer's in a different one?
to an extent, yeah.
Yeah. So it is, it's true. It's like, I think sometimes they don't realize that the percussion is actually pitched sometimes. Like, so, but you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, we are okay with certain things, but that is a style of that kind of music. And it's acceptable because it's done a lot. Okay, well, in an aria or something in an opera setting, man, if you miss a note, people are like, whoa, they don't know what they're doing. So we just had this, or if you drop a beat, which I was playing the piano the other day for a group, and we had mixed meter. It was 3, and then 1 meter of 4, and then 1 of 7/4, and I kept not adding the 4th beat of the 1/4 measure. I just kept, well, that screwed everyone up. And then when I tried to fix it, half of them did it correctly, and the other half did it wrong. Like, we're coming back to that next time because I screwed it up. But so it's like, it's okay, we made that mistake. But still, if you make a lot of mistakes, if my group would perform that piece of music and they did that every time, it would fall apart. People would be like, they don't know what they're doing. So in music, we have this weird expectation that we're somehow supposed to do everything perfect every time. And yet then that's the art of what you were saying earlier, which is admitting that, you either admit that you make mistakes, but then also find a way to not show it on your face and how to be in a setting where you're like, yeah, I totally screwed that up. No performance is ever perfect, ever. But man, if people can't tell, that's a skill. So, but yes, don't worry about playing the piano. Practice it.
All right, that's why I said she just gave
Yeah.
me permission.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I can do this.
Practice it and figure out like a couple warm-ups that you're really good at,
Mhm.
and then over time keep adding to that. And
Mhm.
eventually you'll be really good at it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as far as the piano part, maybe be able to play the melody for them,
Mm-hmm.
and work on different phrasing things and whatever, help them with the pitches.
Uh-huh.
But then use digital means after that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
And also, I've just with my own personal experience, I didn't start singing professionally or on stage till I was 34 because
Okay.
of stage fright and terror.
Yep.
So I've worked through a lot of that.
which is a huge thing.
Oh, people are
Yeah.
terrified.
Yep.
It's scary.
And if like one person tell them they're not good, then they believe that.
Hey, well, that was kind of, so I had a big sister who was the singer in the family, so I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, so I shrunk myself for years.
Yeah.
And didn't do what I loved the most.
Glad you're not doing that anymore.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
But also that, and then acid reflux, singer, singer stuff, acid reflux, vocal damage from that, but also
Yeah.
just life circumstances and things like that, and having to come back and find what the new normal is with your voice.
And you gain major confidence when you work through those things.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be really cool for you when you're working with your students and they're like, I just can't do this. And you will probably be able to help of them,
Yep.
which is awesome.
Oh, no, I've got a ton of stuff in there
Yeah.
that's just like, oh.
And there's things that you
Sure.
probably don't even remember learning, again, like I said earlier, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I did that. That happened to me too. And
Yeah.
that'll be a really great way to connect, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah.
To see how it works.
No, I'm looking forward to it.
Any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, what can I do to help these guys build their businesses? I don't know if you said anything already about it, but like I was popping in and out.
No, not really. I would say the way that I typically, honestly, the best way to build a business like this is word of mouth. That's just it's the person that's drawing in the students. So if a student has a really bad experience with me as a voice teacher, that's gonna probably be bad, right? Also, with that being said, I have had lots of students that I didn't really, this is on Facebook, isn't it? No, we didn't click necessarily, and that is also okay. To be like, here's another idea, here's a friend of mine who's a voice teacher or whatever. That's okay. We don't all get along with everybody, like that's just not real, right?
Or teaching style and learning
Yeah.
style
Yep.
really don't mesh.
Exactly, and that's okay.
It's like finding a good therapist.
I was gonna say, or a hairstylist.
All of it.
Right? So it's like, it's okay if people don't get along, but marketing, as far as advertising goes, but the hard thing is you have to get people who then trust, that they're like, okay, I'm gonna jump into this ship and I don't know where it's going. So then, but then that first group of people, and they're like, then it's word of mouth, and it's like, oh my goodness, that is a fabulous studio to go to. Word of mouth, and they know how to do it. Performing yourselves, and having students be like, I want to play guitar like him. I want to be able to do that. I didn't do that a lot because I was like, I can teach you basic piano technique to about the intermediate level, and that's about when I quit, and then that's about where I'm at. Like, I can play all kinds of things. Like I said, I started again when I was 18, which was a while ago. But still, I have to practice piano. Like, I have to practice every time I have a rehearsal just to make sure that it's in my fingers. Now, I can write a piece of music, like I said, and sing it without even looking at it ahead of time because of the skills that I have, because of my time that I put into that. I am a better singer than I am a piano player. That doesn't mean I can't teach piano. So I would never play the piano in front of other people, like for entertainment. I could maybe, but like I wouldn't. So I wasn't as well known as a piano teacher because I can't play as much, right? So guitar, you don't have to go out and perform. You don't have to go on the street corner like we were talking about earlier, but you could. People would be like, oh man, that's so cool.
We could just get together.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because if I sang, everyone
Well, you play, I'll sing.
Okay, so as a music person though, I'm like, or an educator, I'm like, you can
Showing up
sing.
with a pop
You
band.
can learn how to sing. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's it.
Okay,
Bye.
We're in this together. Don't worry.
Can I say more?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you decided not to. Yep. Not
No
because you can't.
one needs that.
Not because you're incapable, but because
We're
you
arguing
don't.
semantics, aren't we?
Yes, we
All
are.
of it. All of it is that.
Except for the mindset goes back to that is I can't sing because I've decided that I can't, right? Is a really big part of the things that people go through. Now, percussion, you do have to have a sense of steady beat, right, in order to do that,
Good cut rhythm.
right? However, I tell everyone, do you fall over when you're walking? Sometimes I run into things, but still. Do you fall over? Do you have a heartbeat? Can you breathe consistently if you're running? Ah, yes, you literally can keep a steady beat. Now, how you transfer that and how you use that is different, right? Guitar is hard for me personally because I play it, kind of, I have it, but I am trying so hard to use my music theory knowledge and apply it to guitar, and it's right, exactly, that's why I can't play it. It's my knowledge of music theory. I try to create and I structure my mind of how the guitar works, and it's like 6 pianos to me. I can't explain it. It's because of what it's stressful to me.
And then
So,
you're paralyzed by overthinking?
yes,
Exactly.
yes, yeah.
I've had that.
Yes.
too.
So I then had to decide, okay, this is like on Friends when she's like, when Phoebe plays the guitar, she's like,
No, it happens.
yeah, so she's like, no, you have to do the claw. That's that one. It's like, okay, well, instead of like thinking it's this pitch and this pitch and this pitch, okay, that's the chord to make this, you know, fully diminished whatever, okay, and then you play it or pick it like that. That doesn't work for me, or probably most people.
Yeah.
Right.
And don't play fully diminished.
I agree. Right. Secondary dominant. A secondary dominant going to whatever. Nothing fun. I can't do that on the guitar. So, but I'm like, okay, so I play that. So my problem is I paralyze my overthinking when it comes to guitar. It's like there's a barrier.
Just play power chords.
Play what?
Power chords.
My fingers are not long enough.
Yes,
It hurts my fingers.
She's already made it up.
I've already decided.
Her mindset or her fingers are too short.
like I can't. Like my hands are so.
That's why I play ukulele.
Yes, exactly. The first one I learned on was a classical guitar.
No.
I know. Because the strings were easier to play.
You play power chords on a classical or something?
I didn't though. That's the problem. I couldn't.
okay.
So
I
there's
have.
two. You could, yeah.
No, I do.
I mean, really? See, it's cool.
Smells like
Fun.
Blend it all together.
Yeah.
Anyway, we all have our things that we feel like we can't do it. So with students, it's like, I want to learn how to play guitar. Well, you can. You want to learn how to sing. You can. We have to all start from where we're at. So I think I know too much music theory to get out of my own head. Seriously.
You know, when I was taking a theory class out at City College, and I went to a jazz club in Northeast San Francisco. And I was talking to the house band.
Yep.
They were on a break, and they were like, "Oh, you sing?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm trying, and I'm learning this right now." And they were like, "Well, as soon as you learn it, forget it."
Yep.
When I mentioned theory,
Yep.
that's the first thing they said. Well, as soon as you learn it, forget it.
It's cool sometimes if you're like,
But for me as a singer, I never really found that I needed it that much. I mean, it's good to be able to explain charts and
right.
positions.
Or
on a
like,
basic
why is
level,
this part hard? Because it's this.
but- Right.
Okay.
I use theory after the fact.
Yes.
Before the fact doesn't do me any good.
Yep. And that's what I was thinking with the way my son was too. Same thing. Yep. Exactly.
It doesn't tell you what to play, it explains what to play.
Exactly. Yep. And you actually don't even know how to read music in order to make music. So there's multiple ways to do it.
Most of my life has been by ear.
So
By ear.
yep. But a lot of people is like
And sight reading. From your
they get stressed. Yeah, they get stressed because that's a whole different skill. Learning how to read music.
It's in language.
It is.
Yeah.
So we can already feel it because we're human beings and we know how to do it and how to make it happen. So yeah, that'll be awesome. Yeah.
Like, I'm a garage band guy that
Yep.
like got some training,
Yep.
and then that's
Perfect.
That's it. Like,
Yep.
but I don't read music when playing when I'm doing bands and things.
Yep.
We don't sit down with staff before we write
No.
out what we're learning.
Now the cool thing is if you compose a piece of music or write your own piece of music, it's really cool if you can write it down because then you can actually like someone else could then learn it and play it. Like that's the whole point of
So
that.
my first vocal coach made me transpose Lady Be Good into my key on staff paper. Pencil, rulers, all of it. So I mean that was actually a really good.
It's good for your brain to grow in that way.
Yes, it was. But I don't think I would do that to anybody now. Well, because you
It's a
don't
different
use
skill.
written charts.
Yeah.
iPads didn't exist then.
Well,
And now you got iRealBook and you can just pull anything up and transpose it.
I say digitally, you can just highlight it all
And do whatever.
key.
Yeah, and yeah, so it's like,
So that's not necessary.
No.
But understanding how it works is really cool.
yeah.
People get stressed out by transposition, especially people who are vocalists who are trying to learn how instruments are transposed and how things are written. Like it's just different ways of thinking.
Well, she was prepping me for open mics and taking my charts.
Okay.
Yeah.
For singing?
Yeah, they go to open mics.
See, to me,
Because you had to have charts. To walk in and
Oh,
with a house
they
band
play.
like a trio.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
that makes
Yep.
sense. Okay.
I thought you were just writing these vocal parts. I was.
No. It was the actual
Oh.
charts.
Which
that I
is
was
really
taking
cool. That
to-
is a
Right.
skill. That's
Well, and
it.
that was, what, 98, 99? So yeah.
Now you just, you know this song? Yeah.
Well, now I just stand up and call it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just airdrop.
Count 'em in, let's go.
Right.
So things even in our world of making music and performing has all shifted and evolved. So the other thing is like whoever's taking lessons is what do they want to get out of it? Is understanding what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so you guys already know all that stuff. Anything else?
Not really.
Yes, I also throw music theory out the window. I just know it.
Same.
It's totally in my head.
Yeah, it's a,
I have several contracts via email from voice coaches I've worked with. Do you guys want me to share those with you? Just like their studio policies, 24-hour
Yep.
cancellation notice.
Yep.
It's very similar to a doctor's office.
Yep.
That way you're not getting screwed with your time and your money. Do you guys want those?
I mean, I'll take it.
Okay, and then you can maybe just pick and choose from that stuff.
cut it up and.
Hey, Mindy, you have my email? Can you send those to me too?
Yeah, for
Please,
sure.
thank you.
Yeah.
Can I have your minutes too?
Yep.
Like a copy of it? Just
How
email
about
something.
I type everything up and then I can also share my contact information and I'll just share that with Isaac.
Oh, well, everybody's shared on that calendar deal there, particularly for the date. I wonder if you could do mass emails from that as well.
Oh.
I don't know.
I will try.
Yeah, right. It's Google Calendar,
Yeah,
so
yeah. And even if you don't have a Google, well, maybe you do because you have to.
everybody does.
Handy. Yes, I'll definitely share all that and do that as well. So, anything else?